everybody, and welcome again to another exciting episode of Cizzles, the only place to ingest the latest in technology for higher education and related services. Tonight, I have a very, very special guest, Dave Merves. Welcome, Dave. How are you doing tonight?
Hi, thanks, Christine. I am doing great. I'm excited to be here.
Well, I'm very excited for you to be here. So, tell us a little bit about yourself and what you'll be talking about tonight.
I am a partner and co-director of an evaluation firm called Evergreen Evaluation and Consulting, along with my wife. And this is a second career for me. When I retired from my first career, my wife asked me if I'd come join her to handle all of the financial and accounting components and to also get involved in evaluation. And so I've been doing this for 16 years, and we specialize principally in OSEP-funded special education grants, of which 7 of them are technology grants. So
excellent.
That's how I got to know Michael Kennedy and Jamie and others. So that's sort of the way into it. I alluded to my first career.
Yes, I'm very interested in that.
In full transparency, I was one of those fortunate people at a very young age, I think I was about 8, who knew what I wanted to do, and that was to cook. So I began cooking when I was 14. And the classical way of learning how to cook in Europe is to be a trainee for 7 years, which is what I did. And so I worked for Marriott all over the country and in Europe, and was in the kitchens and was a classically trained chef. And then I spent 35 years in total in the hotel business and worked my way ultimately out of the kitchen and into management. And I ended up being the CFO for a company called Relais Chateau, which is based in Paris. Needless to say, nobody in the family objected to going to Paris and dining and all the food. And so
amazing.
That was my first career.
I'm sure dinners at your house are extremely exciting every night.
I still cook 6 days a week.
I can't think of a better platform that was designed just for you. A cooking show and educational technology discussion. It's like it seems like it was just a match made in heaven. So we're very happy to have you here. And I can't wait to talk about the cooking. But first, let's talk about the technology. You talked about your company. So tell me, what purpose does this program evaluation serve?
So one of the things that is not talked about because there's no angst there is the fact that both the Democrats and Republicans have always agreed that there should be evaluation of federally funded grant money. And they began a program a couple decades ago where they embedded evaluation into a number of the funding cycles. And so we are actually, and this is something I want to encourage people to think about. I don't know the level of evaluation experience that the attendees have had, but we're typically embedded in the writing of grants before they're even funded. The Fed likes that idea because in the old days, evaluation was sort of a yes, no. Did you do this? Yes. Did you do this? No. Nowadays, what the Fed likes to see is that when a team is putting together a grant, they want to know with the management portion of that, exactly how are you going to measure that? What's that going to look like? And it's not just measure it summatively, it's measure along the way. So that's our job. And I'll talk a little bit more about that when we talk about the technology. So we're involved in, at this point, 25 projects. As I said, 7 of them are ed tech projects. And the ed techs are a little bit different because it's more like building the airplane as you're flying it. And it requires a different kind of evaluation, which is, so I don't per se have a technology, but what I do have is a methodology, and I'll talk a little bit more about that.
I'm sure a lot of our viewers would be interested in looking at the way that you look at your evaluation of technology in your processing, and they can use those same ideas when they're deciding what kinds of technology to bring to their coursework and to bring to their pre-service students.
Right.
So can you tell us a little bit more then about that?
Sure. So a lot of the work that we do outside of ed tech is sort of your classic survey, interviews, those kinds of things. They can be quantitative, qualitative. With some of the ed tech projects, we have employed a evaluation methodology that's called Developmental Evaluation. And it is a relatively new, I would say probably in the last 5 years, methodology developed by a man named Michael Quinn Patton. And it is just that. It is developmental. It is when you have an idea, but you don't necessarily know where that idea is ultimately going to alight. And I say that because in some of the ed tech projects we're working on, they're actually writing code. And so as they write the code and they do their circular check-ins with both the administrators, the teachers, and the students, sometimes that code writing changes and the ultimate goal changes because they're finding out that what their expectations were didn't meet the needs of the students or the other stakeholders. So what developmental evaluation does, it allows you to back up and to incorporate the new cycle of the product development into the evaluation. So it's much more hands-on, it's much more participatory, and there's far more communication.
And do you have any tips or outlines that you'd like to share about that evaluation?
We can post on the YouTube link a link to the developmental evaluation. People can take a look at that. There are a couple of the PIs on this call if they watch this who are actually using this.
Is that the guy that you were telling me about?
Well, this is the guide to the performance measurement for evaluations that's required by the federal government. And again, I'm assuming that not all the funders are federal government, but this is a great document in terms of creating your project performance measurement so that when you create it, you're actually answering a lot of the questions, and you are also providing yourself, again, that sort of continuous feedback. And that's really important, very important. And as I said, all the more important with the developmental evaluation. And the other thing I should say is in developmental evaluation, we, the evaluators, normally evaluators sort of sat outside of the inner team workings. That is not the case. We find now with the vast majority of our projects, we actually sit in on team meetings, the management team meetings. We have monthly evaluation work group meetings. And depending on the project and the intensity of the lift, we're actually either involved in the actual pre-service material or meetings, or we're involved in the administration of the technical assistance. We typically don't get involved with, as I said before, the code writers. They speak a language that is completely foreign to us, and they'd be spending so much of their time. But there's a lot more communication, and it's much more participatory. And it has so far, I think, been valuable to all concerned, because in some cases, when we've started, one of the first ed tech projects we started was with 2 classrooms in Cambridge, Massachusetts. And now there are 3,000 students. So it builds. And so we're providing feedback to the project team as they are creating more and more and more.
So tell us now a little bit about your cooking and how that's going to relate to what you've been discussing.
Okay. So when I was thinking about what I would cook, ultimately I settled on pancakes because pancakes evaluation is similar to economics, the field of economics. It's ubiquitous. It covers just about anything you can think of. And evaluation has become that same kind of ubiquitous. You can look at just about anything and you can evaluate it. But what I wanted to do, particularly as it relates to ed tech, is that the tagline I put in here is the batter like data matters. And it matters because when we here in the United States think of pancakes, we think of pancakes going on the table for breakfast with whatever, butter, syrup, whatever your topping of choice is. But that's really not where it ends, because pancakes are really worldwide. Certainly if you think across the Atlantic Ocean and go to France, you go to something that are called crepes. And the crepes in France can be sweet, as are crepe Suzettes, but they also can be savory. And then you can continue on. There are examples of pancakes from India, and that's dosa. There are examples of pancakes I just recently found out from Nigeria. And so it goes on and on and on. I have many of those recipes. Again, we'll include them in the YouTube so that people can take a look at them. Feel free, anybody, to reach out to me. I have lots of recipes. So that's why I picked pancakes. And really the connection between pancake and evaluation is you want to pick the right batter. You want to pick the right methodology. And that involves, for us, whenever we're asked to join a project, we always do a period where we get together. I'd like personally to get together in person so that we can understand the project and make sure that what we're designing in terms of evaluation is going to meet the needs, first and foremost, of the project. Because yes, we do have, as I said, the federal government as our funder, who we also have to be beholden to. But really, first and foremost, we have to be beholden to the project. So one of the things I wanted to sort of share, and if you want to put up that evaluation tree, I can sort of show people, well, that's the pancake tree, but there's the evaluation. So these are the various as you can see, the roots of evaluation or social accountability, social inquiry, and epistemology. But then you have the main trunks. And if you take a look, oh my gosh, he's not even listed out here. But under use, you'll see at the very top of this, Cousins, King, and Preskill. Well, because it's so new, Michael Quinn Patton is right out there by where Wadsworth is listed. So it's under, we can see his name on the trunk itself, Patton. But his newest is this developmental evaluation. And so it's all about usage. And a lot of what I will say to people when we develop an evaluation program is it actionable and useful to you? Because if it's not, there's no point in us doing something. And in terms of looking at an evaluation, we may select a particular methodology. That does not mean that we're not going to bring in components from other areas. So for example, on this tree, out to the left there, to the left of Patton, is a guy named David Fetterman, who for many years was at Stanford. Well, David Fetterman's the gentleman who created, I'm sure many of you have been to meetings where they handed out various colored stickies. And after the moderator had sat down on a whiteboard and written down all the topics that people would like to address for the day, you got to go down and put your stickies, on those topics. He's the guy that came up with that. So there's a lot of, application in the real world involved with evaluation. The other thing, and I don't want to get into it too deeply, is evaluation is not research. They're two different components with two different ideas. And I can share documents. I think there's a document that we will share that's called Evaluation 101 that addresses that, where it talks about the difference between evaluation and research. But I just wanted you to see, this sort of evaluation tree. Now let's show the pancake tree, because you'll see what I'm talking about. So on the far right, You'll see some of the things that you can use that will, act as yeast rising. There's Barnwell's cream, baking soda, baking powder. You can have sourdough. I didn't want to put the sourdough out on the counter. On the far left, you have the classic, and a nod to Michael Kennedy. I'm going to hold up and make sure I get it in front. My King Arthur catalog that just came in the mail today, because that is the flour we absolutely use around here. But you can use cornmeal, you can use oatmeal, you can use grits, you can use matzo meal. The bag that's on the left that's hard to see, but you can see moss, that's Hush Puppies. I just picked that up in North Carolina when I was down there recently. So you can use a lot of things. And then in the middle, all the various things that you can blend in or top it with. So it's the same kind of idea. And that's where I sort of settled, or why I settled on pancake batter and evaluation, because there are lots of different choices and ways that you can go.
So it's really interesting the way that you talk about this, because we can use this not just for technology, but many different areas. But I really appreciate the idea when we go back to this tree that, especially for evaluating technology, that we have to keep in mind the use, the methods, and the valuing. And we're not doing research. We're actually going to be utilizing this information. So it is a different way to think about how we gather the information.
Right.
And it does connect really well when you're making pancakes, because depending on, what you're going to be making and what you're in the mood for and who's going to be eating them and what time of the day you're going to be using it, and who your audience is going to determine the choices of the ingredients, similar to looking at the choices that you have for evaluating the technology that you're using. So
yeah. I refer to that group of things as the environmental factors. So if you're making pancakes, many people, I'm sure, have seen it on the side of any kind of flour or cake box, that there'll be a cautionary warning that says, if you're baking above 6,500 feet, adapt the recipe to X. And when I say environmental factors, one of the things that I found out, my forte in the kitchen was pastry, and pastry is very temperamental and very particular, and as it relates to humidity, to water, to temperature. And so those are all the environmental factors, and there are plenty more. But the same is true about evaluation, and you just listed a whole number of, for example, if you're doing an ed tech project and you're working with high school, that's different than if you're working with middle school. Right. And it's different if you're working with students who are special education students on a literacy project than it is if you're working with gen ed students on a math project in high school. So you have to consider those things when you're deciding what the project is going to look like and what the evaluation of the project is going to look like.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I love it. So now that you have your ingredients, why don't we take a look at your cooking video to see how
Okay, I have to give a disclaimer to everybody. Okay. So I had knee replacement surgery 3 weeks ago.
Oh my goodness.
So I pre-recorded the video when I had two good legs, because now is not the time for me to be standing up and moving around the kitchen. So when you see this, apologies, but here we go.
Okay, let's take a look.
So now let's do some cooking. You can see my sous chef over there, Missy Raven. I have to give her a treat for being a good girl. She stays out of the kitchen when I'm cooking, and she gets to try what I cook. So let me get the pan going. I typically start at about a medium high when I'm cooking. I've got the syrup on a low heat there. And I chose to use a scan pan today, which is a non-stick pan. And you can use a griddle, you can use a cast iron, you can use whatever. The only thing I would caution is if you use a cast iron or an iron griddle, the heat retains, and I would be turning that temperature down from medium high ultimately to a medium low, particularly if I'm doing more than one batch, because you will really scorch the outside before the inside even has a chance to cook. And the other thing while I'm saying that is the time it takes to cook depends on the recipe. I mentioned there are 5 recipes in the resources. If you have fruit, you like blueberries, which is what we like during the summer, we get fresh blueberries. That sugar content in the blueberries will also make a difference in the cooking, because it'll scorch, so you need a lower temperature. Typically pancakes are 4 minutes or so. We like them thin. And I use some people use a ladle. I like to use my mixing bowl. This recipe, I'm doing the everyday recipe. And this is about a 1/4 cup per pancake. And you want to make sure you get your pan good and hot. Again, adjust your utensils to what you're using, because I'm doing a scan pan, which is non-stick. I've got my plastic. Yep, you can see the butter is going, so we're ready to make some pancakes. And when you make pancakes, the first attempt at filming this, when I flipped one, I caused it to flip over. No worries, you can fix virtually anything. No mistakes. It's all about the end result, and it all tastes good. As I said, this is the everyday pancake recipe. You can mix that up by using different kinds of sugars if you want to add flavor to it. Sometimes I'll use a mixture of water and cream or milk. You can use just about any kind of a liquid. I like to have my eggs at room temperature when I do this. What I'm looking for here now is for the bubbles to start forming, as you can see. And then we will be flipping them. The other thing to think about is the thickness of your pancakes when you cook them. If some of you like to have a thicker pancake, you definitely want a lower temperature, because it'll burn before the inside's even cooked. And let's take a peek here and see how we're doing. Yeah, just about there. So the other thing when you're cooking in temperature, think about the grain you're using. If it's a quinoa or if it's a cornmeal, it can be a different cooking temperature. So you're probably going to want to experiment a little bit with these, which is half the fun of it, because you get to have them again and again and again. Okay, I think these are ready, and it is. You can see that nice little brown coming up there. And as I said, you really want them to cook probably no more than 2 minutes on this side. These are pretty thin, so it might not even be that long. I've got my syrup ready to go, and I've got room temperature butter because I like it to really melt. And I think these are looking pretty good. They're smelling pretty good. So I'm going to go ahead, make sure you turn your pan off when you've finished. Yep, these are done. I'll just stack them up, put them in my plate, pan out of the way. And then I come over, apologize for the banging, and here comes the sous chef, because she knows what's coming. Of course, the phone would ring. We'll just have to silence that, won't we? Such is cooking in a live kitchen. We put on the syrup. Of course, half the fun for me. And you can use a lot of different toppings, jams, all sorts of things. But living here in Vermont, nothing like having good maple syrup, which is delicious. Vermont, by the way, produces half of the maple syrup in the country. So now let's cut into these. Oh, they're nice and, I don't know if you can see, but nice and smooth. Got to give the sous chef her little taste. There you go, Missy Raven. So that's it. Let's go back to the live version right now.
Well, that was amazing.
I'm hungry.
I know, me too. I think I'll be having pancakes for dinner. I loved how you talked about the pancakes, because you're absolutely right. And I'm thinking how it connects to the technology that we use. There's so much out there available for our faculty and our pre-service teacher programs. And it's really not about using everything, but it's about taking that idea that we need to use something. So let's look at what's going to fit the needs that we have at that moment. Sometimes it might be just a plain pancake and we can make something quick and easy and simple, and we just make it quick and there we are. But sometimes we need to do a bigger evaluation of it and decide maybe we'll use some more complex ingredients and maybe we'll make something that we haven't tried before and see how it turns out, and play with it a little bit too, like play with those ingredients. Like you said, sometimes you put cream in. I feel like, oh, I never thought about that. We're in my house, we're basic pancake people, but maybe we can make some adjustments and try something new. And I think that really says a lot about what our mission is at CIDDL, is to be able to get people to think about it.
Yeah, what's nice is that the American Evaluation Association has a number of topical interest groups, and I've been a member of the technology group for well over a decade. But that group is now splintering because there's assistive technology, there's educational technology, there are all these different components, and I would just urge the project leadership, when they start thinking about doing something and they start thinking about bringing an evaluator on board, to ask those questions. How much experience do you have? Are you familiar with? And if you go on to the American Evaluation site, which is just simple, eval.org, there's a lot of information there, and you want to make sure you're bringing somebody on board who is going to have some familiarity with technical projects.
Yeah, that's great. I love it. And I am really hungry for pancakes right now. I felt like I could smell them here. So thank you so much. Is there anything else that you'd like to talk about your technology or your recipes?
I guess what I would like to, again, just sort of stress is I think it's important to bring your evaluator in early, so that they're getting the full context of what it is you're trying to do. Because in our process, we come in and we talk, and once we have a understanding, we'll start to look at the methodologies. But then what we want to do is, once we have their project plan, is create the logic model. And then from the logic model, we create the evaluation plan. And then from that, we create the data collection plan. So it's just a matter of bringing us in early and communicating. And that's, really the important part to us, is that communication.
Well, thank you so much. For more information about this program and other resources for higher education and related services, please go to CIDDL.org. Don't forget to follow us on social media and join us for our next CIDDL Cizzles. We have a pretty good lineup that's coming up, so I'm very excited about our future chefs. And thank you so much again, Dave. We really appreciate your coming and sharing your knowledge, not only about cooking, especially pancakes, but also about your program development. Thank you so much.
My pleasure.